At midnight, a mute janitor chased disappearing ink across museum walls, while summer rain turned an entire calligraphy gallery into a vanishing ghost. In a tiny Shikoku alley, 62-year-old Jiro Tanaka locked the crooked doors of a rain-soaked museum no tourist bothered to remember. Every night, he swept puddles from the wooden floor, polished cracked glass cases, and watched ancient ink murals darken only when humidity kissed them awake. By noon each day, the heat returned like a thief, and the walls faded again, shedding history in pale streaks. Jiro could not call for help with his voice, so he answered the crisis with notebooks packed with sketches, formulas, and weather maps. He studied the building like a physician studies a failing heart, marking where sea wind entered, where plaster sweated, and where pigment died fastest. The obstacle was mercilessly specific. Too much summer dryness erased the murals, but too much moisture bred mold that could swallow them whole. Money never arrived, experts never stayed, and the museum's board preferred silence because admitting danger meant admitting years of neglect. Jiro refused that convenient blindness, and he began gathering materials the island offered freely, but nobody considered valuable. Before dawn, he walked the harbor collecting crusted sea salt from mooring posts, tea soot from old kettles, and dew shaken from typhoon-bent leaves. On a scarred work table, he mixed those strange ingredients into tiny black batches, testing each one on scraps of handmade paper. Some mixtures cracked like burned earth, some bled like bruises, and some held their color only under the breath of wet air. Because he could not lecture, Jiro taught with repetition, patience, and demonstration, turning every failure into a labeled lesson pinned beside the next attempt. Neighborhood children first wandered in to escape storms, dripping on the floorboards and staring at the silent man painting darkness onto paper. Jiro handed them brushes, aprons, and index cards filled with drawn instructions, then pointed them toward bowls of salt, soot, and dew. Their first obstacle was not talent, but attention, because children rushed, spilled, guessed, and wanted masterpieces before understanding what materials were doing. Jiro solved that by making them observe before touching, timing how long ink dried near open windows, cold tiles, steaming kettles, and damp sleeves. He transformed the museum into a laboratory of ordinary miracles where every room tested one part of the mural's survival. On laundry nights, he led them through alleys strung with wet shirts, showing how fog clung longest to cloth and softened brittle fibers. At the supermarket, he had them stand by freezer doors, where sudden condensation filmed the air and taught them how cold surfaces summon water. Beside idling motorcycles, he held strips of paper near exhaust heat, revealing how warmth can curl edges, lift pigment, and age a page in seconds. The children learned that preservation was not abstract elegance, but close attention to kitchens, sidewalks, weather, engines, and every hidden force touching a surface. Jiro's apprenticeship looked bizarre from outside, yet it gave poor kids something richer than entertainment, a method for noticing causes before blaming outcomes. When a test panel faded, they traced the failure back through temperature, timing, mixture ratio, and wall condition, instead of calling it bad luck. That discipline changed how they faced school, family hardship, and the narrow expectations adults had already set around them, like fences. One boy who kept breaking brushes because his hands shook was assigned grinding soot, where patience steadied him, grain by grain. One girl whose report cards branded her difficult became the group's best recorder, mapping humidity patterns with ruthless precision no teacher had bothered to praise. Another child, embarrassed by patched clothes and a stutter, mastered plaster repairs because he preferred listening to walls over competing for words. Summer after summer, they dabbed preservative into fading strokes, then waited through humid nights to see whether the murals still breathed by morning. Progress came in stubborn increments. A corner that lasted 2 more weeks, a crane feather that kept its edge, a single character refusing to wash out. Jiro celebrated nothing with applause because he had no voice for fanfare, so he celebrated with more responsibility. When a child improved, he entrusted them with a larger section, a trickier formula, or the job of teaching the next newcomer. That strategy built something stronger than helpers. It built ownership, the kind that makes people protect a place long after novelty is gone. Meanwhile, the town kept changing around them, swallowing family shops, widening roads, and treating the little museum as a damp relic awaiting demolition. Officials visited with clipboards and polite smiles, then left budgets that favored brighter projects and easier headlines. Jiro answered neglect the same way he answered evaporation, by creating proof that could not be ignored. He and the children documented each mural's recovery in seasonal charts, paper samples, plaster cross-sections, and careful before and after drawings. Those records did more than save art. They taught the children how evidence can defend what passion alone cannot. Years folded forward like screens in the rain. The children grew taller, then vanished into colleges, apprenticeships, offices, and jobs beyond the island's narrow streets. But Jiro kept sweeping, mixing, testing, and training each new generation that wandered in during storms and stayed for purpose. He aged into his routines, shoulders bent, fingers stained forever charcoal black, carrying trays of drying samples like sacred offerings through dim corridors. The murals lasted because the method lasted, and the method lasted because he gave it away instead of guarding it like personal genius. Decades later, the returning faces came back transformed. The trembling boy returned as a conservator with steady hands and microscopes precise enough to read fibers like tree rings. The difficult girl returned as a science teacher who made children chart airflow before touching a beaker or blaming a result. The shy plaster mender returned in a city office where he could translate crumbling walls into funding requests no politician could easily dismiss. Together, they reopened storage rooms, restored neglected panels, and pushed for legal protection of the building that had once hidden them from storms. During one renovation, a young apprentice cleaning beneath a repaired beam discovered something almost invisible inside the oldest wall. There, tucked into the curve of a brushstroke, sat a mark no larger than a fingernail, too deliberate to be accidental. Then they found another hidden inside a mountain mist, another beneath a robe fold, another in the tail of a painted sparrow. Every mural carried the same tiny brush mark, a silent signature placed where only future caretakers would notice after learning how to truly look. Jiro had never signed his work for praise. He had buried his presence inside lessons, trusting attention itself to reveal him. By then, his hair had gone white as rice paper, and his steps had slowed, but the museum no longer depended on one body. It lived inside trained eyes, disciplined hands, and citizens who knew preservation begins when somebody decides small losses matter early. The practical lesson was plain enough to carry home. Do not wait for perfect tools when your environment already holds clues, materials, and mentors in disguise. Study the exact force ruining your work, name it precisely, test tiny solutions repeatedly, and document what succeeds so others can continue without you. Teach what you learn before you feel finished, because knowledge hoarded in one person dies faster than ink in summer heat. Create systems, not just moments, by giving beginners real responsibility, visible evidence, and a reason to believe their attention matters. Jiro Tanaka never gave a speech, yet generations kept hearing him in every careful repair, every classroom habit, and every policy that saved another fragile wall. The rain still visits Shikoku, the murals still inhale moisture like memory, and his hidden marks still wait inside the plaster for patient eyes. That is how a mentor outlasts time, by leaving methods in people's hands so quietly that one day the whole city speaks them back.